Live in a second.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Is it morning? It's not morning time? It's evening time? Is that Kush? I'm kidding, but thank you for folks who are tuning in for this special edition of our Lives with Fife. Tonight, our special topic is weed, Kush, ganja, Mary Jane, whatever y'all want to call it. It's about cannabis, the cannabis industry, some pending legislation, and all things cannabis tonight with a very, very special guest, Chaney Turner, who's going to be here with us to discuss their expertise in the industry, where we were, where we are today, where we need to go, and just, we're going to just shoot the breeze about weed. So thanks for joining us, and I'm going to call on my special, special guest, Chaney Turner. Hey, look at all the greens in the background. Keeping it nice with the plants. Chaney, thank you so much for being with us today. You are just a leader in the industry. You travel the country around issues surrounding cannabis, and you are the chair of our Cannabis Commission and also a business proprietor. So I'm happy to have your expertise with us today. And let's just talk about it. What's going on with cannabis in Oakland? Where were we yesterday? Where are we today? And where do we need to go? Answer everything.
Well, wow. That's a loaded question because I don't want to just talk about negative, issues, in Oakland. We still have spaces that are open. We still have spaces that are opening. And with that said, there's, still some challenges on a local level and challenges on a statewide level. And so myself and others in the space are working hard to try to make sure that Black people can have some type of stake in this space.
So tell me a little bit more about that, Chaney. When you say Black people are fighting to have a stake in this space, could you expand on what that actually means? And just also, if you could talk a little bit about your history and your expertise in the industry and what makes you an expert in these issues.
Well, the cannabis industry in general is a expensive space to enter, and I believe there's a lot of misinformation in general about people in the cannabis space. One of the reasons why the social equity program was created was to provide resources for people, marginalized folks, Black and Brown people, formerly incarcerated folks, to enter, like I said, a highly expensive and highly regulated space. I don't come from wealth. I don't know too many people that do, to where you can go and ask your family for some trust fund money or doing loans. Many people are bootstrapping, and with that said, all cannabis businesses aren't created equal. And so that's why we have the social equity program and other incentives for people. Currently, we're trying to get taxes lowered on a state level for cannabis retail, mainly social equity retailers in the space.
So what is social equity? Can you define that, and why is it necessary to have special supports for equity business owners?
And so, the number changes every day in regard as to how much it costs for you to enter in. And so, just in general, you're going to need, at least, and this is just speaking like non equity. If I'm just a regular person that's trying to open, a dispensary, I'm going to need at least $2 million worth of capital to, go through all the procedures, of licenses and securing spaces and numerous other things. And so, like I said, if you are a person that is not from a background of wealth or have access to that, cannabis is still federally legal. So it's not like I can go and walk into a bank and ask for a loan to start, this business. And so that's why Oakland is the first city to introduce social equity back when Council Member Desley Brooks was on City Council, introducing it along with advocates and people who came from the legacy market to give input on how we can have a equitable cannabis industry. And so there's certain waivers that you can, receive. You can bypass, paying for, the licenses, fees, and numerous other things that others have to pay for to enter the space that can be a barrier for you. Also, Oakland has other programs that we've introduced throughout the years to assist people, uh, as well as assistance from the state with different grants that's awarded to each jurisdiction to try to help strengthen their programs. But unfortunately, it's still not enough. And if you add on what's been happening over the last few years with the ongoing burglaries, that is hurting, it's hurting all business, but of course, it's hurting the most smallest businesses that don't have uh, the access, like I said, to steady money, cash flow.
Got it. So basically, the same barriers that exist oftentimes for Black people, Indigenous people, Latinx folks, are the barriers that also exist in the cannabis industry. So it takes a
Absolutely.
little bit more than to get started than, say, someone who's been able to navigate these systems with supports.
Right. I mean, traditionally, like I said, it's already hard for these groups to start any type of traditional business.
Right.
And I'm speaking from experience as someone who's owned a small business and also operated a cannabis business as well. And so whatever barriers exist for traditional business operators, it's even more so in the cannabis space.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And once again, I want to just let people know that we are live with Fife. We typically do these every other Thursday, but we wanted to have a special cannabis segment this Friday. Number one, because we wanted to get Chaney's expertise in this subject, but also there's some legislation that's coming before the council very soon. And it tries to get at some of the issues and the barriers that you talk about, according to the organizers that are bringing it forward. And that's the Emerald New Deal. And I recently read an article, Chaney, in the Oakland side that talked about your commission, not just your, but your as the chair, the Cannabis Commission, and the endorsement of this legislation. Can you speak a little to that?
Yeah.
What is the legislation, and what is it intended to do?
And so I want to start off by saying that I believe that we all agree that um, people who've been harmed by the war on drugs deserve reinvestment. Um, we deserve better forms of equity. Um, the Emerald New Deal is an initiative that is being proposed by a group of Oaklanders who would like to take 100% of the cannabis tax dollars to reinvest in communities that have been harmed by the war on drugs. And that's something that I fully support, investing into communities that have been harmed by the war on drugs. However, once you dig into the details of the proposal, it's very vague. And if we're going to have policy that centers drug war survivors, it has to be very it has to be good policy, right? And it has to be more thought of in depth when we're thinking of the world on drugs as a whole, and and not just cannabis, right? And so everything that I just said earlier about our social equity operators and businesses, and keep in mind that about 85% of our cannabis operations are small or equity owned businesses, and the work that I do and others that I work with, we're centering on the groups that we're talking about: Black, Latinx, and Indigenous people, and queer people of color, to get into this space. And currently, all business taxes, no matter if it's a cannabis business, clothing store, bar, all business taxes go to the general fund. Should cannabis money go to the general fund? I don't agree with that. No, it shouldn't. The whole purpose of the Cannabis Commission, when it was formed under Measure Z, was to be a oversight of regulation and taxes. But for some reason, the city attorney took that quote unquote power away, and there really is no transparency around how the taxes is being used. And we know usually when money goes to the general fund what that is used for. um, and so I do agree that cannabis tax dollars do not need to go into the general fund. um, Being that we currently have failing businesses and failing programs, it would be best for us to use that cannabis tax dollars that's being generated to assist Black, Brown, Indigenous, uh, women operators to strengthen their businesses. Um, we're not going to get the tax revenue that we could get if we have failed businesses, or if we have businesses that are leaving. There's a misconception around cannabis businesses that as soon as you open, you're making money over fist. And I can tell you, as an experienced operator, that that's just not true. Even though we have the social equity programs, and it offers certain resources, people still need more capital, right? Folks have taken out loans, and unfortunately, some of those operators have taken out loans, have gone into default. Again, we have grants, but a lot of the grant money comes from the state of California. Oakland isn't holding up its part when we need more investment, and that's where these cannabis tax dollars come in. And so the amount of money that's coming in from cannabis business tax would go into what Emerald New Deal is proposing, is to go into this fund. Again, it's very vague how the fund is going to be used. Some of the money would be used to pay a yearly stipend to people who are on staff. Not sure what that would provide. Also, the initiative is proposing, they were proposing to form like a separate advisory committee that would be separate from the commission. And a lot of what's in that is certain things that currently exist. Like, we have a workforce development program. We have, a whole lot of resources that currently exist that really don't need to be recreated. Also, you have certain council members who have taken on this particular who have come on to sponsor the Emerald New Deal, who have historically not really been about investing into the same communities that we're talking about, right? For example, Lauren Taylor is definitely one of those council members who advocates for increased police funding. Just recently approved $500,000 increased budget for OPD, right? A lot of the same things that we're asking for to come from police resources could be used to help these same communities. And so it was not cannabis that brought in militarized weapons into neighborhoods like East and West Oakland, right? Um, and we have to be more responsible when we're asking for the ask of quote unquote reparations or reinvestment. What the Emerald New Deal is currently asking for is, $8 million that's, been generated from the taxes. And while that might sound like a lot of money to certain people, that is not going to repair, the harm that the war on drugs has, created. What we need to be finding out is what was the actual cost that the city of Oakland and the state of California spent to initiate this war on communities that was centered around crack cocaine that was actually planted in our neighborhoods, and young men and women who were used to, push that in our neighborhoods. And initially, the CIA and police departments collaborating to further terrorize and harm communities. And so I'm not against any type of reinvestment, but we have to think smarter about better policy that serves people. Also, what this initiative is proposing is, addressing certain issues like blight, trash, and homelessness, which are important, but is that actually addressing the war on drugs, or is that addressing systematic issues that's just created by white supremacy in general, right? Here in Oakland, and neglect from the state and, of course, the mayor. And so, again, what is the cost, and how can we better address and making sure that communities that have been harmed by the war on drugs can actually have a stake in equity, right? By being business owners. So we have the cannabis program that has social equity operators, many who are drug war survivors, who are coming from communities in East and West Oakland who would like to have successful businesses. How can we better support them, right? We could, again, use a lot of this tax money coming from cannabis to strengthen our businesses, form a department of cannabis, which many cities do have, that can actually better address some of the issues and barriers that operators are having in a timely fashion. And I feel like I'm going on and on and on. I just kind of stop
Listen,
there.
no, and that was great, Chaney, because you just dropped so many gems. I'm taking notes while you're speaking because, wow, you just covered a lot of terrain around.
Right. And another thing I do want to say is that, there is also this false narrative around how other cities are, reinvesting back into communities. And so you have certain cities like Chicago, for instance, that have pledged, 100% of cannabis tax revenue back into communities harmed by the war on drugs. That's great. Do you want to know how many social equity uh, uh, um, operations that are owned by Black, Brown, and Indigenous people in Chicago? Zero. They're all corporate. So of course, go
Wow.
after the corporations. Um, they should be obligated, but unlike those other cities, we don't have that same type of businesses here.
I see. So the reinvestment that they're doing in Chicago is not really reinvesting in social operators because there are none, is what you're
No,
saying.
they're not. It's not the programs, but it's investing in back into communities. And so, however that looks like, with the tax money, and also, California, along with the grants that are awarded, to each jurisdiction, we use some of that money to also award to certain programs and nonprofits that exist in Oakland as well.
Wow. Okay. Where do I even start? I have to say thank you again to our Oakland's own Cannabis Commission Chair, Chaney Turner, for being with us this evening. Chaney just laid out a lot. and I just want to touch on some of the things that you raised, which is the war on drugs that devastated communities, not just in Oakland, but around the country, was centered on crack sales, right?
Mhm.
And so we know, and Vice Mayor Kaplan spoke about this a little bit at our last council meeting. We know that it was an intended strategy that was deployed to destabilize Black communities throughout the country. And they knew that if they criminalized certain activities that people were around, or if they even flooded communities with certain substances, they could arrest and disrupt entire neighborhoods, communities, cities, and what have you. And that's exactly what happened in the city of Oakland.
Exactly. I mean, I think it was Obama that just changed the federal
Right,
regulation for powder and and rock. It
right,
was always deliberate to pretty much keep us locked up, right? Keep us, in a cycle, and you can still see, the effects. I mean, I grew up right here in East Oakland in the '90s and the hundreds, and I went to every elementary school here in this area. And I mean, actually, the neighborhood looks worse today than it did during,
wow,
that era. But that's a whole separate conversation. But
wow,
but you had entire enterprises and entities that was built around our pain and our trauma, right? Programs that were defunded pretty much so we could fund law enforcement, Head Start programs, other programs that kept people housed as well. Um, it being that cannabis is still federally illegal, you can't even if you are in federal housing, you can still be in danger of losing housing or receiving housing. And Biden actually had an opportunity to change that recently and didn't.
yeah. And I do want to take some of these issues that the community is raising and really have a conversation about it. And Chaney, I've known you for many years. I don't know if I met your mother first or if I met you first. I can't remember. But I've seen the work that you do in the community. I've seen your hustle and the jobs and businesses that you run. Shout out to Town Biz. And I just want to say that I've always known you to really represent for the culture, to represent for Black folks. And I don't think you have to be from Oakland to know that it's been our governments that have been deeply involved in the origin of destabilizing Black communities. And so
Right.
when you say, if we really want to hold accountable the folks who are responsible for kicking in doors and bringing in SWAT and destabilizing folks through extended prison sentences for a substance that they brought into our communities, we need to be looking at law enforcement agencies to pay for that bill. We need to be
Right.
looking at all the different industries, the CIA who actually brought these drugs into our neighborhoods, which they still do to this day. They're still a part of the drug trade today. We need to hold accountable the entities that were actually responsible for creating this harm, because I'm not knocking anybody that's trying to organize to get repair and some kind of healing to their communities. And I think it's really, really important that, because you said it, like the organizers who are throwing down for this, I got total love and respect for. And the
Oh, totally. Yeah.
yeah, you touched on that, right? You touched on that. And the way that you do that is not the way that this legislation was drafted. When I recently brought forward, and we're going to get into how the Black New Deal was co-opted and watered down and stolen from us 2 years ago, when me, Kat, and Turha tried to push forward a Black New Deal through the previous city council. We're going to touch on that too. But when I asked for the city to do a study on just West Oakland alone, because there was a time when West Oakland was 61% Black, because it's the only place that Black folks could live in the city. Everybody was segregated to West Oakland. just in the homes that were demolished and taken from Black folks alone, just from a short period of time, 5,100 homes would result in a total of upwards of $3 billion if we were to address that harm. And that's just from 5,100 units. We're not talking about all the other stuff surrounding that. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. So when I say that $3 billion, I'm talking about when you said we need to figure out the total and what the harm was done, so we know how to start taxing folks. To maybe $8 million is not the sum that we need to be looking at. That
doesn't even scratch the surface. That doesn't even scratch the surface. Right. You know, when we talk about that. And, you know, I do want to be more clear, you know, and I just want to break down a few of the things that Councilmember Taylor's proposal, you know, is asking for. And again, what I want people to understand as well, that, and you can look, you know, online, that, you know, the purpose of the commission is to oversee the business taxes and the, you know, regulation of cannabis. Now, I do my advocacy work separately from that under Beyond Equity. And so people need to understand the difference between what the commission does and the overall, you know, advocacy, you know, is. I'm advocating, you know, as a commissioner for mainly are, like I said, the businesses that are owned by these folks that are from, you know, the community. And so some of what the proposal that Councilmember Taylor gave was, the way it's broken down is, you know, 15% would go to management, oversight, and planning. 35% goes to City of Oakland programs, pursuit for strategic plans. 50% city funds for outside programs. So where's the money going? 15% divided between the In-Harm Commission, or I hope I said that name correctly. Cannabis Assistance Program, including expansion of current programs for certain businesses, and a loan program and technical assistance fund. It's not enough, especially for our social equity people. Again, we have a workforce development program. So 35%, 1/3 of that 35% would go to job training. 1/3 would go to blight abatement, prevention, cleanup, illegal dumping, graffiti abatement, and homeless services. 1/3 for loans and social equity license holders for expenses. Then 50% divided between nonprofit agencies, private agencies, and some public agencies. There's very little going to the social equity programs. Again, some of these things already exist in what we are covering through the state grants that we get. Again, blight, abatement, prevention, that is, you know, an issue. As somebody who's been living in certain districts in Oakland, those haven't been addressed at all. And so again, there's other entities that we can pull from to address, you know, those issues. But out of the 35%, 1/3 of that is going to social equity license holders.
What is it? So, because I've heard.
So it'll be about, like, I think, like a little bit over $1.2 million
for social equity cannabis holders. All of them in Oakland have to split how much?
1.2.
Do you have an idea of how many social equity holders there are in the city of Oakland right now? I gotta look. I can't remember off the top of my head because I have a lot of numbers going on right now. But we do have, I think we have about, once I break it down again, it's like maybe 100 and
52. I don't want to go off record, but
No, that's fine.
yeah, I don't want to go off record, but I do have all of that. But again, I'm not trying to dog anything that anyone is doing.
I know.
I would love to see, and I'm also not saying anything that I have not said to anyone. So this
Yeah.
isn't me. I've had meetings with everyone. I respect, what people are doing, especially trying to advocate for people that have been harmed. Right. But what I would love to see is a more coming together of Oakland community, people who have been formerly incarcerated, operators, people who have been, on the commission, and other people who live in Oakland who would like to give input on, first of all, how can we pull from multiple entities and not just, cannabis, right? Because again, all money is going to, general fund. We have this progressive, tax that's out there that's, trying to be passed to help small business owners. I would love to see city council also include cannabis in that for our small business owners that's, making a small, that's, grossing under a certain amount. In 2019, we advocated for businesses that gross under $500,000 to $500,000 in gross receipts to get a tax break. And those businesses, still exist. And so it's not just, this initiative, but, being that I am speaking to you as a council person, I want you to know that we're still looking at y'all too.
No,
right?
listen, I get it, and I'm listening. I'm listening to everybody, even the folks who don't think that I am, even folks who have completely opposite positions and opinions than I do. I have to listen, and I also have to steward the general purpose fund as responsibly as we can. And because the dollars that would be taken away from this measure are not replaced with new dollars, then we have to be really careful. We've been advised by our finance department that we could be facing a recession very soon. And it is my position as one council member, and these are just my opinions, that if we are taking away funds that are already problematic in that they're not serving the entire city and not replacing them with new money, then we are impacting these communities that have already been harmed, that are not being served even more. So I'm looking at the granular details of, okay, what organizations are going to get 50% of these funds? How is that structured? Are we talking about giving the administration 15% to monitor this new potential fund, and they can't even monitor what we have existing because of the vacancy rates that we have in the city of Oakland? We have some departments that have upwards of 30% vacancies. So the basic services that all communities deserve, but that communities in my district, District 3, West Oakland, communities in East Oakland, District 6 and 7, places in 2 and 5 don't get, like regular trash service, regular street maintenance, permits being processed. All of those things are currently problematic. Chaney, you just said that it looks worse now than it did during the war on drugs. That's right. A problem.
And to answer your question, we have 165 businesses that gross under 500K a year. Those are our cannabis businesses. So to answer your question, and so everything that you said is point on. But with this, even though California has a recession, right now, or we might be going into a recession, and we have this surplus, we are going to need that support. We're going to need that support from the state level, because it doesn't look like we're going to get any support on a retail level from Gavin Newsom. And that's another reason why we are going hard, to try to get the funds from the general fund into strengthening, our programs, because what people don't understand is that cannabis is overly taxed. Is overly taxed on the business end, and that tax is being passed down to to the consumer. And so another competitor, right, is the unlicensed market. Being that it's so expensive, people are going to the unlicensed market to purchase because of the excise tax. And so
Mm.
you have your your local sales tax, you have your excise tax, which is retail, which is the business owner, and that's passed down to the consumer. And then you had what's called a cultivation tax. The cultivation tax was just eliminated, but that doesn't dwindle down to retail or the consumer. That's just for cultivators. And so, being that the state just got rid of the cultivation tax, they are saying that they are going to increase the excise tax even more to make up for that cost from 15% to 19%. And that would be detrimental to numerous small operators and social equity operators. And that's where you all come in, the city, because we're going to need to see some more relief, to help kind of balance that out.
Okay.
And if that does not happen, we will be in danger of losing a lot of our small brick and mortar equity owned businesses.
Okay. Take note. We will be in more conversation about that. And there is, we've tried to provide additional supports for the businesses who have been impacted by robberies. I know that cannabis dispensaries and businesses are more at risk because they can't bank at federally insured institutions. They're more at risk in our targets, especially our equity holders. So we have looked at that and have tried to make some changes. And I definitely look forward to being in conversation with you about what
Right.
can be done.
And I also want to be clear, because I did not say that this was Councilmember Taylor's proposal. He is the sponsor, and he also presented. And so nowhere did I say it was his. The people who have been leading this have been Mr. Reed and Gamilla, and I've spoken to everyone directly and have said everything that I've said on camera tonight to everyone in private conversation and public conversation around the importance of these tax dollars being invested. Now, if people want to have conversations about what restorative reparations look like, then we need to all come to the table to discuss that. Because as someone who has been directly affected by the drug war from East Oakland, cleaning up trash is not that is not addressing the drug war, right? When my mother went to rehab and got clean from crack cocaine and decided to start a business, there should have been a fund, right? Or some type of resources, right? We need more resources to put more money into people's pockets. And then we might see, some of the changes that we want to see. If we want to clean up graffiti and blight, then we also need to hold our council members more accountable and making sure that we can have cleaner neighborhoods and trash cans that can, actually address certain issues. We also need to make sure that we vote people in office for mayor that won't have over 8,000 people sleeping on the street, so that we can, address those issues too. And so I want us to be real and actually have better imagining around healthy investment in Oakland and how our communities can just thrive and not just clean up trash. Because there's people who are suffering from all types of addiction walking around right now. We need better harm reduction programs in Oakland. I have not seen any discussion, of that as well. We have Black and brown people suffering from mental, illness, but also addiction, walking throughout the entire streets of Oakland.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Chaney. And before we start taking questions from the folks who are calling in or just putting in their questions, I'll start to take those from Jyoti. How do you think that we can move past the harm? Because it feels like people are taking sides and making this very personal. and I'm going to get into why this is a challenge for me with the particular sponsors that started not even when they shot down the Black New Deal, when we drafted the resolution to bring shortly after COVID. I'm not even before that. I'm gonna get into a little bit of the history because a lot of the folks that I'm seeing coming to present and coming to City Council, I haven't seen before, and I've been petitioning City Council for years. I didn't want to run for office, but it's because so many folks asked me to run that I did. And quite frankly, even some of the council members who are seated right now, I never saw them at a council meeting. I never saw them advocating in the community for addressing the issues of militarized policing, re-entry, housing, homelessness. I never saw any of that. I've seen you, right? I've seen you fighting for these things for years. And I've seen some other, and it doesn't matter, but I'm saying people are, I think, are not really attuned to what's actually happening politically in the city, because the council members that have proposed this ballot initiative, as you said, which is completely up to them. You said it in the last meeting, are the most pro-police, give the police whatever they want council members that we have in the city right now. So for me, when it came up and folks were like, why don't you support this? Why aren't you're a Black city council member? I'm automatically skeptical when people who are directly connected to the mayor, who've undermined everything that I've tried to do as an organizer, called out like career.
And not just undermine things that you've done, but or undermine what the community has done and what the community has asked for numerous years. Cannabis is intersected to everything, right? To housing, to police crime, police brutality, right? Health and numerous other things. And so, like you said, people have shown up for non-cannabis related things that center Black health and Black life, and many people who have been impacted by the drug war. None of those people were there, right? None of those people were there.
Right.
And so if you're about centering people who are drug war survivors, you will show up when it's something about taking funds from law enforcement to invest into this same community, right? And so I don't support hypocrisy. That's the thing. And I don't care if anyone disagree with that. I don't support hypocrisy. And at the end of the day, it's hypocritical, and unfortunately, something that is supposed to be about community has become very divisive. In community. And the number one, and let's not, it's become very divisive, and it's dishonest. You can't go and look, I've organized, I've owned business and different things. You have to do your due diligence. And so just because I had a conversation with you about something doesn't mean that you endorsed me. You can't just go and put people's logos unknowingly on mailers as endorsements. That's not honest, and it's not how you gain the trust and support of the people that you're supposed to be advocating for. Because a lot of people, unfortunately, and this is no fault of the organizers, but people didn't do their own due diligence in reading. They just saw other logos. And that's unfortunately, that's not how you do honest organizing.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, because Chaney, I make no apologies either. I don't support hypocrisy. I do not. And when we brought forward the Black New Deal and it was shot down by what the community was calling at the time the conservative caucus. It was once, a few council members didn't run or lost their seats in 2018, the existing conservative caucus was replaced by a new conservative caucus that was always working in alignment with the mayor in ways that undermined Black and brown communities, undermining the homeless community, the tenants, everything
Right.
that
And
we
that,
were fighting
yeah.
for poor and working class Black and brown folks. They were in opposition every single time. So then when
And that conservative caucus represented all of East Oakland and
right,
West Oakland and West Oakland, but mainly
right,
East Oakland.
East and West
The
Oakland,
main people that needed that investment at that time. I was there at those meetings as well, and they voted all of that down. So
right,
it's interesting, and it would have been, I believe it would have been more than what this is proposing as well. Again, not against any type of reinvestment, but we deserve way more than that, and we have to make sure that we have language that speaks more to community that isn't vague.
and not only do we deserve more than that, and we have had council members in the districts with the most need who have not represented pushing for that need. I mean, and I had good relationships with all the council members, even though we would fight. But Larry Reed was a council member for like 200 decades in East Oakland. And that legacy and history of disinvestment in East Oakland is partly on his watch. And
Right.
I said, regardless of us being, all skin folk is not kinfolk, regardless of how much I did not align with their politics, I never tore them down. I never spoke ill of them as people, as they were sitting on the dais making decisions that were in opposition to my principles and everybody that I organized with. I never talk bad about the conservative caucus, like them being bad people or whatever. I don't agree with them. I mean, clearly I ran against one of them and won. But I didn't let people just talk crazy and, just be super disrespectful. I cannot respect your politics and still respect you as a human being.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I will never tear anyone down in any type of degrading way. We all live here. We all live here in Oakland. I feel that we are all connected. There are many times where I never agreed with Lynette McEnany. I see her all the time. Like, hey, and it's we respect each other. We don't have to agree
Right.
with our ideologies, but also at the end of the day, this is about us creating a better Oakland, equitable Oakland, an affordable Oakland.
It looks like Chaney.
Sorry, I had a phone call that came in. That people can not only have thriving businesses in, but also can afford to live here.
That's right. It's all connected. And so I don't want people having to choose between having safe streets and clean streets, that the trash is picked up where there is no illegal dumping, and not having services in another area. We need to be fighting for it all. And the places where poor people live and where Black people live and where Latinx people live, those are the places that deserve the most investment. And once again, we need to figure out how to get it all, because the leadership that's been in place has not really been interested in creating that type of equity, which is why I do got to give a shout out, because what I'm seeing is I'm finding myself in the same position that Councilmember Desley Brooks found herself in a lot of times. There were other Black folks on the council with her, and she wasn't always on the same page because she was fighting for her district and for the poor people and the Black people and the brown people in her district. And I'm doing the same thing. So you're not going to see me on the same page oftentimes with people who have an agenda that is not about lifting up that base. Because what I'm doing is real transformation. I'm trying to do real diligent work, which is why with the Black New Deal, I did the investigation first. And that was just a cursory investigation and an understanding of what's happened to create a baseline of what we are due. Once we create that baseline, we know what to go after, and the sky is the limit, because we are due a great debt. that is not
We're
being.
exactly. We're due a great debt, and I for one definitely won't apologize on my stance because I believe that uh, we deserve we deserve more, and it shouldn't have to take cannabis legalization for Oakland or any other city to address reinvesting into communities that have been harmed by the war on drugs. That is something that organizers like yourself, ATPT, and Oakland Rising, and many have been doing the work, for years through trying to quote unquote defund, right? Defund, and we talk about reimagining, and all of those things, right? And we have to. I think you said investigate. We have to investigate better when people are using words like reparations to invest um, uh, back into our communities, because we've seen many bad policy go through Oakland that was supposed to center certain communities. And have we seen any change, right? We've seen that happen with the soda tax and other initiatives that, have gone through. You had some people that passed some like menthol ban, a couple of years ago. What did that actually do, right? What change did that create? Like, people can go to San Leandro or another city to get what they need. It's the same thing with cannabis dispensaries that don't allow cannabis in their city. You can still go buy the cannabis somewhere, right? And so when we have any initiative, doesn't matter if it's about cannabis reinvestment or anything, we have to do our part to read the fine print. And we also have to ask the questions. And sometimes the questions might not be questions that people want to hear, or they might be hard questions. But in order to get the change that we want to create, we have to do the hard work. And part of the hard work is asking the questions.
So let's start asking some questions, Chaney. We've talked it up. I still believe we're only scratching the surface. And I think what I would like to do is have the Emerald New Deal folks back on, because this whole talk is about cannabis and how we do the best around getting resources to our equity permit holders, the people who are in the business trying to stay alive in cannabis today on an unequal playing field, and what we as legislators need to do and what the state of California needs to do. These are all conversations that need to continue to happen. And I think in a future live, I will have on folks from the Emerald New Deal, because that's just a piece of the conversation around cannabis. But there's a whole conversation that has been happening and that will continue to happen as long as we're trying to push for equity. But you called it, so let's ask. Chaney, I've never known you to shy away from tough conversations. Are you ready to take some questions?
I don't mind.
All right, take some questions. What do we got here? Let me scroll through here. Sarah is saying, let's get this started this November by getting the Emerald New Deal on the ballot. So there's an institutionally binding commitment for the city to start investing its own money into this. Is that a question? There's a question mark there.
It sounds like a comment, but
there's a question mark at the end of the sentence. So I will say that this is not binding. This is not a binding initiative that would require the city to invest its own money into social equity programs. And so there's still questions, a lot of questions that need to be answered around this particular ballot initiative. And that's the place to do it is city council. We'll be having another city council meeting on this measure very soon. It's next week. So we'll be getting into more of the details. And I will share that this has created a lot of concern for people who work for the city, who are the city staff, that are saying, if you take away $8 million from the general fund that's supposed to be, paying for certain services and not putting it back, that's a hole. And the $8 million that we're talking about taking away, it's 2 times the proposed general fund allocation for the Community Police Review Agency. It's 1.4 times the size of the entire general fund allocation for workplace and employment standards enforcement. It's 6 times the general fund allocation for the Department of Race and Equity. It is 4 times the general fund allocation for public works. And so those are a few of the things that there are concerns that haven't been answered yet. And I'll just in full transparency, I told one of the organizers who reached out to me, I said, I will work on this for y'all. This is last minute. This was not my focus. I'm very clear on the legislation that I'm bringing from District 3, but I will divert my focus from my work to work on this, but I cannot do it with folks that have been undermining me and who actually took the legislation that we wrote for the Black New Deal and took our names off. That happened. And it really breaks trust. If you take legislation, take the organizers' names off, put your name on and fund your people. That's what happened with the conservative caucus in 2020, early in 2020. And that changed, that blew my mind. I was like, you took what we drafted and put your name on it. So I can't work with legislators and partner on legislation without the true accountability for something. Is, to me, that was violent, right? It's a form of violence. And we were all shocked. There were 40 Black-led organizations and individuals that worked on crafting a resolution for the Black New Deal and COVID relief and getting money to East and West Oakland for a Black New Deal. They stole that from us. So trust was broken. And so until we address that trust, I cannot partner with an individual who would do something like that. So let's have some real accountability, because when questioned about it, one of those city council members was like, yeah, we did that. It was political and we had the power to do it. And I was like, whoa, okay. Fair enough. I hear you. So let's talk about that. And let's talk about having some restorative justice around those political practices that happened to Black organizations in 2020 before we start talking about let's all be unified. We can be unified if there's accountability and there's a truth telling, so that we can all come to an understanding like, that was not okay. That was not okay.
Well, the key word you said, it has to be a conversation that's based from restorative.
Right.
There's been, I don't want to say a lot of harm, but there's been a lot of shit, over the last few years. And and going back to what we were saying, the respect is there for people. I think that once the political games start, that's at least where my frustration comes in, and my hat come off. And so it's about having those restorative conversations, but at the same time, keeping them real. We have a lot of work to do here in Oakland, and it can't be done with people who really ain't about it.
Right. And that's the hard part, because I think what we've learned under white supremacy is that there are a lot of people that will carry the water intentionally or unintentionally and have us all, remaining in our existing positions or pushing us down further. And that's what, I want to avoid. And it's painful to know and to realize, but, we got to keep it moving. And so there's another person that's saying, will the Black New Deal be doing any of this equity for the reentry community members or mental health like the Emerald New Deal? I don't know if I could say like the Emerald New Deal, but that is the exact intention of the Black New Deal as it was when we brought it forward in 2020. It now, as it's morphed into its new legislative position, it exists to invest in 6 primary areas, and public safety is one, and not public safety like policing, but public safety in terms of addressing the needs to keep people safe, which is a lot larger than just, policing the streets through a militarized force. It is about those reentry services. It is about helping people start their own businesses. One of the landlords that came to city council last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago now, said that, we need Black landlords because they're the people who rent to Black tenants, and implying that like it's harder for Black people to get rentals from non-Black people. And unfortunately, that's true.
It's true.
So So when we say public safety, it's all of the ways to keep people safe. So that's people that are returning home, which we made investments in this mid-cycle budget adjustment for housing for people returning home, housing formerly incarcerated seniors to come home to a safe place to be, because otherwise a lot of them end up on the streets. We've talked about investing $1.25 million into job training services for this population and other people that are looking to work. So not only does the Black New Deal do that, or seeks to do that, because I'm pretty clear that we're going to get some pushback in the city, but it does that and more. And so, yes, in short, the answer is yes. And some of those things that we've asked for clarity from the group has not been clarified. So I think there's a lot more conversation that needs to happen. But I just shared previously why that work is difficult and has been difficult for me, which I shared with one of the END organizers a few weeks ago. So one of the statements, it's not a question, I don't see many questions here, Chaney, is you're going on because you can't find anything in the Emerald New Deal that is short of addressing all that you claim to be for. I guess that's to me. This is a great start to addressing some of the harm from the war on drugs. I completely disagree. I don't believe that illegal dumping and cleaning streets and city services addresses the war on drugs. It may, I think it's something that addresses the concerns for low-income communities, because those are the those are the
Right,
neighborhoods.
low income communities, and many of them who happen to be drug war survivors.
Right.
Right, but that's still
it's not
not right, because I can go and we can go and do some graffiti, and trash pickup, but if we're not getting to the actual root cause of what brought that trash there, right, or like you said, certain services to support people. And it's also the war on drugs also just isn't about formerly incarcerated people and people who have been uh, uh, formerly addicted, to substances. It's the people in the middle, right? It's people like myself who grew up in a home that was a crack addicted home. It's people whose schools were, directly impacted, to where you might have not have been able to get certain services or resources to get you to the next level of education, right? And things that have been a lot of things that were extracted from our communities. And I'm also not saying that my vision is any better than anyone else's. It's not. It's about us bridging, our visions together. There are, the fact that the organizers at End even had the thought to address drug war survivors is an act within itself. So how can we bridge that organization and the Black New Deal and numerous other people in Oakland who have great input around reinvestment into communities that have been harmed by the war on drugs, and going back to the drawing board, right? Because I don't believe anyone is saying that, you are terrible people, go away with this initiative. No,
right.
that's definitely not it. But again, we're talking about policy, and policy, once it's once it's passed, is there. And just like with any social equity program, not just with this, it's easy to say, well, we gave y'all X amount for your reparations, and it's still trash right here. So what is the bigger vision of having healthy reinvestment? Also, we say it where it says also, while supporting our operators who are from these same communities. I think people really need to understand that there's no if, there's no if and. These are people from the same community. And just because someone has a business doesn't mean that they're thriving, especially in this space. You have multi-million-dollar corporations in California that are not even making half, right? So if you have corporations that are struggling, imagine what a social equity applicant who just got, a $25,000 loan to do something, is trying to recover. And people have to think of social equity not as a handout. It's something that we are
Right.
owed, but it's also a stepping stone. The reason why I would love to see successful Black and Brown owned cannabis operations is because they don't have to be equity forever.
Right.
Right? Just like someone doesn't have to be on welfare forever, or social equity,
Right.
or Section 8 forever. It's a stepping stone to get you to the next level, right?
Mm.
That's what equity is. It's these programs is a stepping stone to get you to the next level. I would love to see formerly equity owned businesses making multi-million to where they can invest the type of tax dollars that we want eventually. But what we're really doing, and I'll be candid, what we're really doing, and not overall, but what we're really doing as like broke ass people to put into, a fund that, and not even put in, but we're asking, they need our help. At the end of the day, they need our help. And I held a roundtable with equity operators. They want to invest. They would love to invest. They would love to invest as much as possible, but they're saying that they can't even do what they would like to do to help their community because their business is not thriving, is struggling. A lot of these people would like to do more than what the city is doing. That's their own vision.
Yeah.
And we can get that. A lot of operators would love to donate and do more food drives, and they do with the little bit that they have. Even when I had my little dispensary, we donated a lot of things and, fed people with the little bit that we have, because this is our community. When you have businesses, cannabis or not, when you have businesses that are a part of the community, in the community, they do give back. They do give back. People just need the opportunity to grow and have some type of ROI.
Right. And that's what I'm committed to helping that work happen. So I just wanted to share that little piece. And I'm going to go through some of more of these questions. We're actually a little over time, but I want to make sure that people don't think I'm not trying to address all their questions and statements. And so this next one says that it's from Judah Bell, that's saying the CIA brought in drugs and weapons to ensure they protected their investment. Guns were brought in from Russia and Israel. The CIA did that. We still see the effects in inner city violence today. Facts. Nothing even to add to that. So thank you. And then thank you for putting up that screen. I hear there's another comment. Gamilla, I think, said, Carolyn Chaney, come on, you sound ridiculous as you try to lie and circle around the truth about this community initiative. I'm not exactly sure what the lie is. I'm stating my perspective.
I'm not addressing that. Okay. Next question.
Carol, how are you the only Black council member that is not supporting the Emerald New Deal? Probably because I'm not running.
Right.
I'm not running, and I've never engaged in policy ever before I was on council, and won't in the future, to create a base and to gain a base. So you're not going to see me support something on identity politics because of how it looks. You will see me support something based on the merit and how well written the policy actually is. So for me to have critiques and say, I can't support this for how it's written, I can't support it because of how the sponsors have undermined real work for the community that I support and that I love, and we need to have some accountability. That's the position I take. And so if it were done differently, which is what I said to the organizers, then we can have a conversation. But the way that it is moving forward, especially with the personal attacks and the mailers that went out slandering me, I can't support that. It's part of the reason why so many of the folks who have allegedly endorsed this legislation have created public statements, press releases, and removed their names from this legislation. It's at least a half a dozen organizations and individuals who've peeled off the support because of how this has been organized. So I'm not saying it's the end. We can start to have more conversations, but I can't support legislation just because people say it's pro-Black. or pro-Brown, because that's not necessarily the case.
Exactly. And I said I wasn't going to address that because I've had conversation with Mr. Reed and Camilla for over a year, and I've said everything that I've said. And so for that comment, like I haven't said anything differently that I've said. And I was calling the council person who's sponsoring your initiative a hypocrite, not organizers. I don't like people putting words in my mouth. I was very
Mm.
clear of who I was calling, who was coming from a place of hypocrisy, and it's council members who consistently advocate for increased police funding that could actually go to the very same communities that they claim that they want to assist, who have been harmed by the war on drugs. So I'm all about being clear about what I'm saying.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. And so there's another statement from Camilla. Thank you. It says, Carol, the door is still open for you to come and join this historical initiative and your fellow Black City Council members to start the repairing of some of the harm inflicted on our communities. This can be a part of your Black New Deal, which is still an idea you secured $150,000 to study. It is not a deal yet. We agree with the need for a Black New Deal, and the Emerald New Deal could be a start for that. We should talk about it, Camilla. We should talk about it. Once again, I don't, how do I say this in a way that I want it to have teeth. Everything that I put forward, I want it to have teeth. I want it to mean something. I want it to be impactful. And the way that I'm doing this moving forward is the way that I think policies that are intended to help our communities should be done thoughtfully, intentionally. I don't even think the finance department, who we have to go through, has even shared their concerns about the way that this has come forward. So it's not the end. It's not the end all be all. I'm not perfect, but the way that I engage in policy making is just different. It's just different. So, but you said we can still talk about it, so let's still talk about it. Okay. Nora Smith is saying, if your cause is righteous, you don't need to be deceptive about who endorses it, period. Oop. I think that was just a mic drop. So thank you, Nora Smith, for adding that. And I don't see a lot of questions. I see a lot of specific comments. Damon Johnson saying that the drug war was widespread for a lot of people impacted by the drug war sham, especially Black and brown and poor people and poor whites. We all agree on this, but how can we address this issue with clear minds and not misleading those who find the truth? All right, hold on. This is what we need. Hold on. But how can we address this issue with clear minds and not misleading those who will find the truth in the matter later? So how will you fix it to be perfect? When these are blue blocker glasses. These aren't real glasses. Hold on.
Let's see. The drug war was widespread for a lot of people impacted by the drug war sham, especially Black and brown and poor whites. We all agree on this, but how can we address this? Oh, it went away.
This issue with clear minds and not misleading those who will find the truth in the matter later. So how will you fix it to be perfect? When there's a class of folks who seem to continue with business as usual. If we now play weakling blame game, slippery slope, who really wins as the rich continue to gain wealth and tea? Maybe that was continued later, but you left off. Damon, I think that's a huge question. There's a lot of questions in there, but one of the things that we need to make sure that we do is lead with truth and be as transparent and open as possible and continue to organize in our communities. Once again, there are folks who are trying to gentrify communities. There are folks that are trying to bring in a whole new demographic to our communities that aren't really concerned about maintaining and bettering people's lives. And so we have to be honest and we have to tell the truth about who it is we're organizing for and who it is we're fighting for and how do we get to those next steps. And it starts with communication. And that's something that hasn't been done in this particular situation in a principled way. And I hope that we can get back to there. And I'm always committed to being there. I don't think relationships have to be perfect or without struggle. I think struggle is how you get stronger. And, I'm willing to continue to struggle with folks, but there has to be accountability. And to date, that has not been the case. There have been emails going out. There have been flyers going out that have been attacking and slandering. There's been misinformation put out. And then, there's also the policy piece that we need to address. But in terms of equity in cannabis, we have to be clear that the playing field, as in every playing field in this country, is unequal. So my job, I feel, as a legislator, is to make the playing field more equitable for the people who have been struggling just to be here. I think, and I say this all the time, I heard it from somewhere, but it's the reality of how I organize without me even knowing it, is that when the market, when government is responsible for working in the best interest of the people, we have to do what we have to do as legislators, because the market doesn't care. The market doesn't care about whether you're poor, whether you have children, whether you're sleeping outside. It doesn't care. So we have to be responsible and care enough to make the systems work better for people. Right now, in a neoliberal state, it's about privatization, it's about austerity, and it's about keeping the status quo in place. And that is the complete opposite of what I stand for. So if you really want to know why this Black person is often, did y'all hear that? Y'all hear that?
Oh, yeah.
If you want to know why the cheese, Carol Fife, the cheese, stands alone sometimes, it's because I'm trying to break a system that was designed to break us. That is why. I don't play games and I don't play along with keeping the status quo as it is. So you will often see me standing alone because the system wants to stay exactly as it was constructed. So with the people who are helping keep the status quo in place are not going to stand next to me because I'm in opposition to what they stand for. So everything that I'm doing in the city is in opposition to what we know is necessary to change our conditions in our community. So I don't know.
Right. And I mean, yes, you are the only Black council person not supporting, but there's also a lot of Black advocates just in general. And so who, again, believe that better policy could, serve these communities, our communities that have been impacted by the drug war, the ongoing drug war. That's still continuing. And so, again, not to continue repeating the same thing, I don't have anything, against any organizer or any person or individual that's trying to do work on behalf of drug war victims. There are numerous organizations that have been doing the work and continue to do the work that I would love to see people, align with. Beyond Equity, we're moving towards more impactful work to gather data from actual communities, and so that when we have these conversations, we know, because it should be led by the impacted folks, not council persons or people who might not live in the districts that we're discussing, and all of that. And so I'm always open for conversation, but like you, I'm open for real conversation and I'm open for real work. And I also don't like people putting words in my mouth or changing what I say.
Same. But I'm here for the conversation. And so,
Yes.
and Chaney, I want to thank you for being here for the conversation. This is just one of many, but I do want you to clarify something. Where does the Cannabis Commission, and you are the chair, where does the Cannabis Commission stand on the endorsement of the Emerald New Deal?
So we actually did have our meeting last night, our meeting last night, where we passed a motion to take a vote on the next meeting. We will be rescinding the endorsement that was made, which was a really unclear endorsement in the first place. But we have voted unanimously to rescind, but we'll be taking that vote. We voted to rescind, basically.
Oh, I see.
Or the endorsement.
So similar to many of the organizations that were on the endorsement list.
Similar, and this would just be a word of advice to anyone trying to try to organize. You have to do your actual due diligence when getting the endorsement. People need to sign on, and people, there has to be meetings that are held. A conversation does not mean an endorsement from an individual or a nonprofit or an organization. And with some of the things that came out of the last meeting for city council, especially with the misleading of organizations, we just don't feel comfortable.
Right. I hear you. I hear that. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say, because Damon Johnson says, let's continue to talk about it, I'm here for it. Camilla said, let's talk about it. Yes, let's do that. There's a lot here. There's a lot that needs to be repaired. There's harm that has been intentionally inflicted on our communities, that has been sponsored by government agencies and law enforcement agencies. So when we talk about repairing the harm, let's bring those conversations to the people, right to the feet of the people and organizations that cause that harm. If we're talking about doing that, I will be first in line to call in the battle cry. Please believe me.
Exactly, because I think it is important to have multiple. Oakland is diverse, even in our Black community, right? And with our Latinx community. And so when we're talking about the war on drugs, we also need to make sure that, some of our Latinx people who might have some immigration issues, right, are at the table around that, because that's still a form of a big issue and a form of terrorism that they have to live with, right? Even within, our Black communities. How does the war on drugs look for a woman versus does a man in regards to support, and not just reentry from being in prison, but in reentry for people who are leaving rehabilitation centers, and how they can have support moving forward in transforming their lives. And so again, it's bigger than trash pickup and graffiti. When we're talking about restorative justice, it's deep work and it's root work, and we all have to be a part of that conversation.
And I think that's a great way to end. Somebody said, "Speak on it, Chaney." Great forum. Samantha Wise. Hey, I see you. And Samantha's one that's out there doing that work and supporting community too. I just want to give a shout out.
Yeah, she's a part of our cannabis community. We have some great people, that can definitely contribute to this conversation, that's doing work. Supernova Women, Hood to Get Better, Beyond Equity, Equity Trade. We all are doing local and state work on behalf of these same communities. And so it would really be great to work with other people and get as much support as possible. And thank you for this platform and this opportunity tonight.
Thank you for your wisdom and expertise and taking on some of the tough questions and comments. I don't shy away from any of them. And so I know you don't either. I would stay here and talk to you longer, Chaney, but I feel bad for holding Jyoti. So I'm going to go ahead and let everybody know we can talk. I've only been talking to one person. I think I've had a conversation with one person throughout this process around the legislation, the potential ballot initiative. But if there's other folks I need to be talking to, y'all reach out to me. Reach out to District 3 at oaklandca.gov. That's District 3 at oaklandca.gov. Because listen, we're not always going to agree, but I will always listen. I will always consider and try to implement, especially what the community is talking about. But I also have my expertise, my opinions, my experience as well that we need to figure out how to bring together. But there's a way that you do that. And it includes transparency. and it includes honesty. So that has to be a part of the work that we do, because the reality is we're all we got. So we got to figure out how we work together for our common interests. And I'm always here for that. So email me, reach out to my office. If you can't get in touch with me, definitely reach out to my chief of staff. She's the better version of me. That's Tanya Love. And she checks our District 3 email address. We're bringing on additional staff, so we're more responsive, because this is a lot of work trying to wrap our arms around everything that's wrong, not just in my district, but the entire city. And there's a lot of work to do. We have way too many vacancies. That's part of the reason why our city looks like this, is because we're not paying competitive wages. We're not having as many staff that are necessary. So if you know folks that are trying to get on with the city of Oakland, let me know, because we have over 100 vacancies in our public works department, 30% vacancy in our planning department, in our Department of Transportation, which is why the roads are so raggedy. So it's a lot going on that I'm trying to really dig deep and figure out to fix. But I need you to get it done. I need you to make it happen. So once again, hit us up. Chaney, I appreciate you for all of the work that you do, for putting it in and putting Oakland first, as you always do. Appreciate that. Give my love to Miss Lizzie, and
I will.
We'll talk soon. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.